Imagine you walk into your local grocery store next month and see row after row of empty shelves. The foods you count on, bread, pasta, even fresh produce, just gone. That's not some Hollywood disaster flick. That's the real warning we're getting from supply chain insiders, and it's already starting to hit major cities around the world. We're seeing countries slam the brakes on exports, and food prices are shooting up faster than anyone expected. What you put in your cart today could be impossible to find tomorrow, and even the basics might turn into expensive luxuries overnight. This isn't just about exotic foods from far-off places. The list of 30 everyday items at risk includes the basics most Americans depend on. The kind of stuff your family eats every week without a second thought. Things like bread, rice, cooking oil, milk, and even your morning coffee. We're talking about foods that form the backbone of your meals, and for the first time in decades, there's a real chance that some of these could vanish without warning. Experts are sounding the alarm. They're watching export bans pop up, crops wiped out by drought, and supply routes clogged or shut down by global conflict. The truth is, we're only one bad headline away from a full-blown food emergency that leaves stores picked clean in days, not weeks. If you think this is overhyped, just look at what's happening overseas. In Europe, governments are telling millions of people to build up a home food supply for at least 3 days, just in case a crisis hits. Meanwhile, shelves are already emptying out in places hit hardest by weather disasters or political chaos. That's why it's more important than ever to pay attention and take action now, not after everyone else wakes up and starts panic buying. The good news is, you can get ahead of this curve by staying informed and making smart choices starting today. I'm about to break down exactly which foods are most at risk, why this is happening, and how you can protect your family from being caught off guard. If you want to avoid becoming part of the next grocery store stampede, stick around and make sure you're ready for what's coming. Take a minute to picture your pantry without bread, pasta, or even cereal. It's not just a weird thought. It could be a real possibility sooner than you think, because the wheat supply, the backbone of our food system, is facing threats from every angle. Normally, wheat is everywhere. Sandwich bread, crackers, flour for baking, even most of your favorite breakfast cereals. But right now, wheat production is sliding in the wrong direction in every major region that matters. The US, India, Ukraine. Between wars grinding on in farming heartlands and brutal droughts destroying harvests, global wheat reserves are falling fast, and it's pushing prices higher week after week. Here's what a lot of folks don't realize. Wheat isn't just another crop. It's the foundation of nearly 1 out of every 5 calories eaten worldwide. So when wheat takes a hit, it sends shockwaves through everything from bakery cases to pasta aisles to snack shelves. You've probably noticed bread prices creeping up at the store. And it's not just your imagination. This spring, suppliers are openly warning that, with a few more bad weather events or a drawn-out conflict overseas, the price of flour and anything made with it could explode overnight. Bakeries are already bracing for flour shortages, and some are even quietly changing recipes to stretch their current supply. It doesn't stop at your loaf of bread either. Think about pasta, pizza dough, tortillas, breakfast pastries. Wheat is the quiet MVP behind all of them. And when the cost of wheat jumps, the price tags on every single one of those products follow right behind. Worse, supply chain breakdowns can trigger actual shortages, not just price hikes. The last time we saw even a minor disruption, certain pasta shapes and specialty breads vanished for months, and folks were left staring at empty shelves. Imagine that on a bigger scale. The bottom line is, you don't have to be a prepper to feel the impact if wheat keeps getting squeezed. If there's one thing to take seriously in all this, it's the scale of wheat's reach. Shortages here don't just mean no toast in the morning. They can hit just about every meal, every day, for months. So now's the time to start thinking about what you do if your favorite staples aren't as easy to get, or if the prices make you think twice about loading up your cart. Start paying attention to weather and crop reports in big wheat states and countries, and consider what you'd grab as an alternative if bread and pasta get a lot pricier, or even disappear for a while. There's still a chance to get ready, but That window might be closing faster than most people realize. Most of us barely think twice about tossing a bag of rice in the cart. But right now, this humble staple is quietly slipping into crisis mode. Rice isn't flashy. It doesn't get the headlines that beef or eggs do. But it's the second most important source of calories on the planet, feeding billions every single day. Here in the US, you might notice a few empty spots in the rice aisle or price jumps that seem a little steep, but what's really happening goes much deeper. India, which is responsible for a huge share of global rice exports, has started pulling back on shipments, and the ripple effect is being felt everywhere from local takeout spots to family dinner tables. What a lot of folks miss is just how central rice is to food security. It might not seem like a big deal if you're used to plenty of grocery options, but for millions of families, rice is the core of a meal, not a side dish. When exports get squeezed, prices shoot up, and suddenly entire communities are left scrambling for alternatives. It's not just an overseas problem either. Last year's unpredictable weather hammered rice crops from Asia to the southern United States, and the global supply hasn't caught a break since. Combine that with rising shipping costs and more countries hoarding their own supply, and you've got a perfect storm building under the radar. So, why is this such a big deal for regular shoppers? Because the rice crisis tends to sneak up on you. First, it's a small price hike. Then the brands you like disappear. And before you know it, bags of rice are being rationed or replaced with pricier, less familiar varieties. Restaurants and school cafeterias get hit too, which means the shortages quickly spill out beyond just home kitchens. When a basic filling food like rice gets scarce, it puts pressure on everything else. Suddenly, beans, lentils, and pasta have to pick up the slack, which can push their prices even higher. Here's the smart move right now. If rice is something your household uses regularly, start building up a small buffer while you still can. You don't need to clear the shelves, but having an extra bag or two means you're not stuck if the next round of export bans or weather disasters hits. Pay attention to news from major rice-producing countries and keep an eye out for odd gaps or limits at your local store. A little preparation here goes a long way and could save you a lot of stress when the next wave of shortages lands. If you think corn and soybeans are just for livestock feed or the occasional backyard barbecue, you might want to take a closer look at how much of your daily diet relies on these quiet workhorses. Corn is tucked away in places you'd never expect. It's in your breakfast cereal, soft drinks, salad dressings, even most processed foods and snacks. And when it comes to animal feed, corn is king, driving the price of everything from eggs and chicken to burgers and cheese. But here's the kicker. This year, both corn and soybeans are facing some of the roughest headwinds we've seen in decades, with major exporters warning of shrinking harvests and governments eyeing their stockpiles more carefully than ever. The story with corn starts right here in the US, where extreme weather, wildfires, and flooding have hammered crops across the Midwest. Add to that ongoing trade disputes and export bans popping up in key countries, and suddenly the global corn market is looking a lot less predictable. When corn supplies tighten, it doesn't just hit farmers, it causes a domino effect. Meat and dairy prices soar because livestock feed costs more. Processed foods get pricier or quietly shrink in size. Even ethanol for gas can get squeezed, driving up costs at the pump. That's the kind of chain reaction that can change your grocery budget overnight. Soybeans might be even more at risk. They're one of America's biggest exports and a huge source of protein for people and animals worldwide. But climate swings, trade fights, and a rush of new export controls in South America have rattled the market. With so much of the world depending on just a handful of countries for their soybeans, one bad harvest or policy change can send shockwaves all the way to your local store. And don't forget, soy shows up everywhere, from tofu and plant-based meat to cooking oil and a surprising number of snacks and baked goods. This isn't just theoretical. In the last couple years, we've seen export bans hit suddenly and without warning, leaving global buyers scrambling and pushing prices through the roof. When supply is this concentrated, it doesn't take much to cause chaos. Even if you don't eat tofu or drink soy milk, the price hikes still come for you through everything from mayonnaise to frozen pizza, and especially at the meat counter. So, what does this mean for anyone trying to stay a step ahead? The smartest move is to diversify what you keep in the pantry. Don't lean too hard on one or two staples, because a crisis in corn or soybeans will echo through just about every aisle. Try rotating in different grains, plant-based proteins, or canned goods, so you're not left scrambling if your usual go-to is suddenly out of stock or double the price. Keep tabs on news about crop failures, trade tensions, or export bans, especially from the US, Brazil, and Argentina. And remember, shortages here tend to move fast. A few days of bad headlines, and it's not just shelves that empty. It's the prices on what's left that make you do a double take. Staying flexible and aware is your best bet for riding out whatever comes next. It's hard to imagine the pantry without chocolate bars, coffee beans, or that bottle of olive oil you reach for when cooking dinner. But right now, these little comforts are turning into genuine luxuries, and it's happening faster than most people think. The trouble starts with where these foods come from. Chocolate depends on cocoa from West Africa, coffee rides on harvests in Brazil and Vietnam, and olive oil relies on groves in southern Europe. All three are now facing back-to-back disasters that regular shoppers don't see until it hits their wallets. Chocolate is especially vulnerable. Over half the world's cocoa comes from a small region in West Africa, where a crop disease is wiping out trees and new labor rules are causing big producers to scramble for supply. The result is less cocoa to go around, and big chocolate companies have already started shrinking bars or using cheaper fillers just to keep products on the shelves. If you've noticed your favorite brand costing more or tasting a bit different, this is why. Experts predict chocolate prices could jump 75% by the summer, and affordable options may soon be a thing of the past. Coffee isn't far behind. Unpredictable weather and drought have hit Brazil's Arabica beans hard, while Vietnam's Robusta harvest, the backbone of instant coffee, is coming up short. Retailers are quietly rationing stock, sending priority shipments to their best customers, while smaller stores see empty spaces in the coffee aisle. Premium and organic blends are vanishing first, but even everyday brands are at risk. Morning routines could be in for a real shock if these shortages keep up. And olive oil? The worst drought in 50 years has hammered Spain, Italy, and Greece. Harvests are down, prices have doubled, and even basic cooking oils are getting hard to find. With so little supply, fraud is creeping back into the market. Bottles labeled extra virgin might not be the real deal. If you rely on olive oil, picking up an extra bottle or two now is a smart move, but also start looking at alternatives like avocado or sunflower oil. It's not about panic buying. It's about staying ahead of the curve so you're not left empty-handed when treats and basics alike become tough to find. A little flexibility, a bit of planning, and a willingness to try new options could help you keep some comfort in your kitchen, even when the old favorites get hard to come by. We've gotten used to seeing fresh avocados, bananas, and citrus fruits on the shelves year-round, but that era of easy access is looking shaky. These popular fruits are facing a double whammy: climate extremes and the risks of growing huge crops in just a handful of places. Droughts and floods have hammered avocado orchards in California and Mexico, wiping out harvests and sending prices through the roof. Meanwhile, banana crops are being threatened by a fast-spreading fungus that's already devastated plantations in South America and is now inching towards Central America, which is where most of our supermarket bananas come from. Citrus is under siege too, especially oranges. Florida's groves are shrinking every year thanks to disease and hurricanes, while global demand keeps climbing. The result? Grocers are quietly raising prices and, in some cases, limiting supplies. Suddenly, that bag of oranges or the perfect-looking lime might not be there when you want it, or it'll cost twice what you're used to paying. These are the kinds of shortages that seem to appear out of nowhere. But really, the warning signs have been flashing for years. For shoppers, the takeaway is to stop assuming that every fruit will always be in season and cheap. When water's scarce and monoculture crops get hit by pests or storms, it takes years, not weeks, for supply to recover. If there's a fruit you use regularly, it's smart to buy in bulk when prices dip and stash some away by freezing or preserving. Getting to know local growers and farmers markets can help too, since smaller producers are sometimes better able to ride out global shocks. And if you're open to change, focusing on what's grown closer to home and in season is the best way to keep fruit on your table, even when the supply chain gets bumpy. The next time you see those perfect avocados or bananas, remember, there's no guarantee they'll be around tomorrow. There's something satisfying about tossing fresh tomatoes into a salad or grabbing a bag of baby spinach for a quick meal. But these crisp and colorful foods might be the first to vanish if supply chains hit a bump. The problem isn't just that they're popular. It's that tomatoes and leafy greens are extremely perishable and depend on a delicate web of refrigerated trucks, warehouses, and skilled farm workers to make it from the field to your plate. Just a small hiccup along that journey, like a sudden trucker shortage or a power outage at a distribution center, can leave produce aisles picked clean within days. It doesn't help that these crops are sensitive to weather extremes. Tomato harvests have been hit hard by drought and heat waves in places like California and Mexico, while lettuce, spinach, and kale face the threat of flooding and disease. When one region gets knocked out, there isn't much backup. That means even minor disruptions can turn into big gaps in the produce section. Maybe you've already noticed the price of tomatoes jumping or certain salad mixes disappearing for weeks at a time. Those aren't flukes. It's the new reality of a fragile, fresh food system. So, what's the play here if you want to keep greens and tomatoes in your kitchen? If you've got the space and a sunny window, try growing some lettuce or herbs at home. Even a small pot on a balcony can give you a steady trickle of fresh greens when store shelves are empty. If gardening's not your thing, consider keeping a stash of frozen or dried vegetables as a backup. They last a long time, hold up well in soups and casseroles, and let you stretch your fresh produce further. And when you do find good tomatoes or greens, don't be afraid to stock up and use what you can't finish right away in sauces, pestos, or as a quick freezer meal. Staying a little flexible and creative is the best way to keep meals fresh, even when the supply chain isn't. Think back to the last time the meat counter was looking a little sparse, or when eggs doubled in price overnight. That wasn't just a fluke, and it's a preview of how quickly things can unravel when it comes to the proteins most of us rely on. What a lot of folks don't realize is that the systems behind meat, chicken, seafood, and eggs are some of the most centralized and vulnerable in the entire food chain. A handful of massive plants handle the bulk of processing. And when those plants get hit, by cyber attacks, disease outbreaks, or even just a sudden storm, the shockwaves are felt everywhere. Just in the last couple of years, we've seen everything from avian flu wiping out millions of hens, to ransomware attacks shutting down meatpacking plants, to wild weather knocking out transport routes. The result? Instant shortages, skyrocketing prices, and panicked shoppers grabbing whatever they can find. And it's not just meat eaters feeling the squeeze. Seafood supplies are taking a hit from overfishing, ocean warming, and new export bans. Salmon, cod, and even basic shrimp are harder to source and much more expensive, with some grocers already putting purchase limits in place. Eggs, often thought of as an affordable protein staple, are surprisingly fragile. The vast majority come from just a few huge facilities. So when one of those goes down, store shelves can empty out overnight. That's why we saw headlines about egg rationing and prices climbing to record highs in parts of the country this past year. And because so many processed foods use eggs and dairy, those shortages echo out into everything from breakfast bars to bakery goods. So how do you protect your meals from getting caught up in this kind of protein panic? The answer is flexibility and variety. Diversify your sources of protein. Stock up on canned fish, beans, nut butters, and even some of the new shelf-stable meat alternatives. Keep a few cartons of shelf-stable or powdered eggs on hand just in case. If you've got freezer space, grab a little extra meat or seafood when prices are low, but don't let it all pile up in one place. Processed protein bars and jerky are decent backup options for short-term emergencies, too. Most importantly, get in the habit of rotating your supply and not depending on just one or two types of protein. If you're open to it, try working more plant-based proteins into your meals. They tend to have a longer shelf life and aren't nearly as vulnerable to the kind of supply chain shocks that hit the meat aisle. The world of food is changing, and the way we think about getting enough protein needs to change with it. When the next big crisis hits, the folks who can adapt will be the ones who stay fed, healthy, and a little less stressed, no matter what's going on in the grocery store. It's easy to overlook the building blocks of your pantry until they're gone, but the foods that quietly hold your meals together, sugar, vegetable oils, onions, and potatoes, are all facing major pressure right now. These staples might not be as flashy as a steak or a basket of fresh fruit, but just try making your favorite comfort food or a week's worth of dinners without them. Climate disasters, new export rules, and fragile supply chains are putting the squeeze on these basics, and the effects are already starting to show up in stores. Start with sugar. Harvests in key regions have been hammered by drought, floods, and shifting weather patterns, cutting yields and making global prices unpredictable. The world's top sugar producers have started limiting exports to protect their own supplies, which leaves less for the rest of us and pushes prices up across the board. The impact goes beyond just your morning coffee. It touches baked goods, sauces, condiments, and even canned foods. Suddenly, a simple bag of sugar becomes a high-demand item, and products that use sugar start shrinking in size or rising in price. Vegetable oils are another quiet crisis. Sunflower and canola crops in Europe and North America have struggled with back-to-back weather shocks, while supply chain bottlenecks make it tough to move bulk oil to where it's needed. Some producers are cutting back on the variety and size of oil bottles they ship, and prices are jumping as a result. Cooking oil is one of those things you barely think about until it's not there, and when it disappears, you start to realize how much you depend on it for everything from frying eggs to baking a cake. Even humble onions and potatoes aren't immune. These root vegetables usually fly under the radar, but disease outbreaks, floods, and trade restrictions have sent prices soaring in some regions and left whole sections of produce departments looking empty. Since onions and potatoes form the backbone of so many comfort foods, soups, and stews, their shortages can upend your meal planning in a hurry. The best move right now? Have backup options. Keep a little extra sugar, oil, and starchy sides on hand, and consider learning a few recipes that use different types of sweeteners, fats, or veggies if your favorites go missing. Try out honey, applesauce, or even mashed beans as stand-ins in baking or cooking. Stay open to new ingredients, and remember, sometimes the basics are the first things to disappear, and a little flexibility can go a long way when shelves start to empty out. Some foods just make life better. The sweetness of honey on toast, a dash of cinnamon in your coffee, or a splash of vanilla in your favorite dessert. But these specialty items, the little upgrades that make a meal feel special, are in more trouble than most people realize. Honey, for example, isn't just a sweetener. It's a survival food with a practically endless shelf life, and it's used in everything from breakfast to baking to natural remedies. But as bee populations collapse and drought shrinks wildflower blooms, honey production is taking a real hit. Local supplies are tightening, prices are creeping up, and pure honey is getting harder to find, especially the good stuff that hasn't been cut with corn syrup. Nuts are right behind. Almonds, walnuts, pistachios, and cashews are all facing pressure from water shortages, wildfires, and rising demand overseas. The result? Smaller harvests and higher prices. And because these nuts are usually grown in just a few places, a single bad season can wipe out a huge chunk of the world's supply. Don't forget about the little things that bring flavor to the table. Spices and tea. Most spices travel thousands of miles to reach your kitchen, and disruptions, whether it's weather, political conflict, or shipping problems, can turn a $3 bottle into a $10 splurge. Even basic seasonings like black pepper and cinnamon are seeing tighter supplies and longer restock times. The same goes for tea and vanilla, which are both heavily dependent on fragile global supply lines. A single storm or export ban can send prices soaring and leave your favorite blend out of stock for months. If you love these foods, The smart move is to buy when prices dip and rotate your stash to keep it fresh. Look for local honey, shop at bulk spice markets, and try alternative flavors or sweeteners when your usual pick is hard to find. Expect some recipe changes, and know that a little creativity in the kitchen can make up for a lot when the world's favorite treats are in short supply. Let's talk about the basics: flour, pasta, canned goods, frozen foods, and baby formula. These are the quiet cornerstones that hold family meals together. Most of the time, we grab these items without a second thought, but they're actually far more fragile than they look. Each one depends on a supply chain that's more like a tightrope walk than a sturdy bridge, with just a handful of factories, mills, or plants making the products that fill our shelves. When something breaks down at any point, shortages can hit hard and fast. Take flour, for example. It's everywhere in bread, pizza, pancakes, cookies, tortillas. But if even one or two major wheat mills have an outage or get hit by storms, suddenly there's not enough to go around. Prices climb, selection shrinks, and you may find empty shelves in the baking aisle for weeks at a time. Specialty flours like gluten-free or rye are even more vulnerable, since there aren't many plants making them and demand can spike unexpectedly. Canned foods are another classic just-in-case backup, but they're not immune to trouble. A big part of the issue now is the cans themselves. Aluminum shortages and new tariffs are pushing up costs, slowing production, and forcing some brands to limit how many varieties they make. That's why you might notice your go-to soup or canned beans missing more often, especially after storms or big news events send people rushing to stock up. If you rely on these for quick meals or emergency supplies, having a little extra on hand can save you stress when everyone else is scrambling. Frozen foods are supposed to be convenient and reliable, but they're also at risk. Fewer plants are making frozen veggies and dinners these days, and even a small disruption, like equipment failures or a trucking issue, can cause big gaps in the freezer section. Sometimes you'll notice less variety, other times entire sections are wiped out for weeks. If your family leans on frozen meals, it's smart to rotate your stash and grab a bit extra when you spot a good sale. And then there's pasta. It's filling, affordable, and lasts almost forever, which makes it a staple for so many households. But wheat shortages and energy costs have led some companies to cut back on what they produce. The result? Fewer pasta shapes and brands, higher prices, and more empty spots on store shelves. Grabbing an extra box or two when you can is an easy way to stay ahead. For parents, baby formula is one of the most stressful items to see in short supply. Since most formulas come from a small number of specialized plants, any hiccup, from recalls to shipping delays, can leave families scrambling. If you use formula, try to keep a small backup and check expiration dates regularly so you're never caught short. In times like these, smart prepping means adding a little to your reserve each week, rotating what you have, and sticking with foods your family already eats. It's not about hoarding, it's about being steady and ready, so you don't get caught off guard when the next shortage hits. When you step back and look at the big picture, it's clear that all these shortages aren't just bad luck or random flukes. They're a result of how complicated, interconnected, and stretched thin our food system has become. Climate change keeps tossing new curveballs at farmers, from droughts and floods to late freezes and heat waves, and it's hitting crops in ways we've never seen before. At the same time, geopolitics and trade wars make it harder to move food across borders when countries panic and put up export bans. All it takes is one shipping bottleneck, a storm, or a cyber attack on a processing plant, and suddenly millions of people feel the effects almost overnight. But even knowing all this, the answer isn't to panic or clear the shelves in a frenzy. Smart prepping now is what really makes the difference. Diversifying what you buy and store, keeping a little extra of what your family uses most, and paying attention to supply chain and weather news. These simple steps put you ahead of the crowd. If you focus on non-perishable foods with long shelf lives, support local producers when you can, and get in the habit of rotating your pantry, you'll be in a much better spot no matter what comes next. The real key is staying flexible. Try new recipes, substitute ingredients when needed, and don't let a shortage throw your whole routine into chaos. Sometimes you'll find a new favorite or learn a trick that helps stretch your meals further. Keep an eye out for sales and bulk deals. And remember that prepping isn't about fear. It's about having options and peace of mind. If there's one takeaway, it's that things can change fast. But a little preparation, a bit of knowledge, and a steady approach to stocking your pantry can help you handle whatever disruptions come your way. Stay alert, keep learning, and remember, being ready is the smartest investment you can make for yourself and your family.